We're here. Usually, we're talking about Stryper or your Michael Sweet solo material. Today, we're here to talk about the new project, Sweet Lynch, the new album Only to Rise, out in a couple weeks. Had a chance to listen to it a couple times all the way through, and it's exactly what I expected going in. Great guitar work, great drumming, great bass, just an all-around outstanding record. What was it like for you to work on this thing?
It was great, man. I mean, it was a pleasure working with all the guys, and it was an opportunity for me to, outside of Stryper, obviously, just show a little more, and bring people to the production line, and kind of show them what I can do as a producer. And I love producing, I love writing, and it was a great opportunity to do that. And I'm excited about it, man. Is it like, reinventing the wheel? Or no, it's not. Mm-hmm. But it's taking people back to the wheel in the sense that it's an album that takes you back to what I believe was the greatest time in hard rock, which was the 70s and 80s. Mm-hmm. And this album really showcases that, and it has a lot of that vibe going on, musically speaking.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I got out of it. I mean, that's kind of, you kind of expect that going in. I mean, yourself, George, the two of the best guitar players in hard rock history, in my opinion. You expect great guitar work, and you kind of expect that sound to come out of it. If it was a kind of a death metal sound, it'd really take you off guard a little bit, but that's not what we get here.
It would be fun to shock people, and one of these days I will. I plan to, with my next solo album, just do something where people go, "What the heck?" But I felt like on this album, I had a clear vision when I was contacted by Serafino at Frontiers. Yeah. I had a very clear vision of what the album needed to sound like. Mm-hmm. I spoke to George, hired him, and he agreed to do it, and I gave him some ideas, like, hey, this is what I'm thinking, let's do this, and let's try that. Kind of an eclectic mix of all sorts of different styles, and I've talked about this. You got a little Van Halen and Journey and Foreigner. You hear little flavors of all these bands, but you, of course, hear Dokken and Stryper in there as well,
yes.
Which is a given. Exactly. So that's what we purposely set out to do,
okay. Awesome. You were originally brought in really just to sing on the record. At what point did you decided, I want to produce this record?
Well, because he had mentioned, Serafino had mentioned John Levin as a guitar player. And, nothing against John. I think he's amazing player. But I just felt like, well, why not get George? If that's what you're going for, why not get George? And it just so happens that I know George, and we're in contact, and this and that. So I'm the one that suggested George, and then I put the band together. I hired James and Brian. And, in terms of producing, I just felt like, maybe call this cocky or whatever. I felt like there was nobody better to produce it than myself. I didn't want to... I had such a clear vision of the way the album needed to sound. I didn't want to risk or roll the dice having someone else produce it. I know Frontiers uses a few different guys. One guy in particular, I think he just produced the Revolution Saint album. And,
yes.
As good as that stuff sounds, I didn't want this album to sound like that.
What has
and that's not a slap. That's not a slap against him or a cut against him. I'm just saying I had a very specific, thing I wanted. Like, I wanted, for example, the cymbals. It's funny. One guy reviewed the album, and it was a great review until the very end. He says there's no standout tracks, which I thought was completely laughable.
I disagree.
Well, I thought that was a ridiculous thing to say. And then he said that the cymbals were too Alex Van Halen-y. And what's really funny about that is we purposely went for that. Literally, I called Brian. I said, "Dude, we got to find Paiste cymbals and these sizes and this kind, because this is what we're going for." And we purposely went for that. So I'm glad he said that.
Because could have said it a little bit better.
Well, yeah, but I always loved Alex Van Halen's cymbals. Oh my God, man! That was one of the best things about every Van Halen album, in my opinion. So, again, we accomplished that, and that's really cool to hear. I just feel like some of the reviews have been spectacular, and then a few others have been just really bordering on unfair in the sense that it's one paragraph, and you can tell they didn't really listen to the album. It's not a thought-out, thoughtful review,
Right. Well, I mean, and if you're going to go in, you're going to record a record, and you know exactly what you want. It's smart to produce your own record in a lot of ways, because you don't have, like you said, somebody coming in and changing your vision for what you want it to come out. It's going to come out the way, usually what you envision it to come out as when you go in.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And it's something else I've said in interviews, and I'm sure there's some producers out there that are not liking me at the moment. I just feel like most producers are overrated and, quite frankly, a waste of money. I've worked with many producers over the years, some who were worth every penny. One of those being Michael Wagner. He's awesome. He's a great guy. He's got great ears. He's a musician. He's a technician. He's a true engineer. He records everything and produces, and he's awesome. But I've worked with other guys that it was a joke. You may as well have just taken $40,000 and put it into a fire. Because they're sticking their head in every 2 or 3 hours saying, "Oh yeah, sounds good," and then going off and doing whatever else they do.
Right.
And that's what a lot of producers do. They're just kind of there to budget and stick their head in and say it sounds good and call the label and say they're really turning out great here. And to me, that's not a producer.
Right.
It's part of producing, but it's not all of it.
It's not the whole thing.
No way. Not even close. Not even close. To me, producing an album is being there, being the first one to walk through the door and the last one to walk out the door.
How has producing, because I know you've produced a lot of Stryper's material as well, how has producing your records helped improve you as a musician, and what's it taught you about recording records?
Oh gosh, I've learned so much. Yet at the same time, I've been in studios my whole life, and I remember going into the studio for the first time when I was 10 years old with my dad. My dad used to track country sessions and do demos, and then he'd go and do the real deal. He had a number of record deals back in the day. Mike Curb was his manager, and so I grew up in studios. And I used to sit there and watch the engineer, and I was just so fascinated by it all, and I just absorbed it as a kid. And once Stryper started recording, I was hands-on. I was in there, EQing and adding effects and saying, "Hey, let's do that. Take a little bit of this. That. There's a little too much 800 on the guitar." I knew what I wanted, and the engineers would look back at me and go, "Man, how do you know this stuff?" I'm like, "Because it's been my life." When we go and sound check, I'm telling the monitor guy, they can't figure out why the floor tom's feeding back, and I'm telling them, well, you need to pull out a little 300, and then they do, and then the feedback's gone. So I know frequencies, and I know how things work, and I've been doing this my whole life. So to fast forward to the past 10 years, I've learned a lot more, certainly, actually being the producer, because I've been able to kind of roll up my sleeves and show people what I can do, and I've learned a lot mainly about layering instruments and little tricks that you do to get this sounding better or this bigger or what have you. But man, I've been doing this my whole life,
Right. Yeah, and you can definitely tell that, it came out exactly the way, just reading, before hearing the record, reading exactly what your vision was going into it, and then listening to it, you can definitely tell that it came out the way you guys wanted it to come out. It's, from beginning to end, I completely disagree with whoever it was that said that there was no standout tracks. To me, the whole thing is standout tracks. You listen to...
Yeah, man, I think there's some really great songs, and some of the best songs that I've been a part of, certainly in my entire life. I feel like Dying Rose is just a spectacular song, and I can't wait for that to come out. in a week. And I'm excited, man. It's really cool. I can't wait for people to hear that and see it. But you know what, man? It's one of those things where, you know, it is what it is. And I hate that saying, but I'm using it anyway. And I just feel like people just aren't going to give you props, you know, when you're asking for it. You got to earn it, and I'm still trying to earn it. And I'll keep making albums and keep writing songs, and maybe someday people will get it. Maybe not. But I'm happy at the end of the day. I'm still able to do what I love to do.
One of my favorite songs is Love Stays, and I don't know what it is about that song, but that's probably one of my favorite ones on the record is Love Stays, and obviously Recover is also one of my favorite ones as well.
Love Stays is one of my favorites, too, and I'm not saying it because you're saying it. I think that's a smash, too, man. I think if Def Leppard released that now, I think it'd put them back on top of the charts.
Yeah, it definitely has. Def Leppard is a great comparison for that song. It definitely has, the chorus has a Def Leppard feel to it in a lot of ways.
Exactly, yeah, it's got that vibe, and it's just a really catchy, really strong song. And you know what? Hey, we're battling it out, man. We're going up against, you know, a lot of different bands and competition. It's not an easy music world out there, so it's very difficult for guys like George and I. Yeah. A lot easier for bands like Def Leppard and people like that. You know, if they release something, like I said, I mean, and I don't mean any disrespect at all. I love Def Leppard. But if they released a song like that right now, I really think that heads would spin.
I think so. I mean, it is hard for bands from that era now to release new music and have it make an impact in a lot of ways, and I don't know why it is, because there's so much music that these bands are releasing that's just as good as a lot of the stuff they released back then, and it's kind of frustrating to see, because it's
I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think, first of all, rock is so inundated. There's so many bands, you know. Anyone can make albums and make music and put their videos on YouTube. Mm-hmm. You know, back in the day, there was a lot more mystery to it.
Yeah.
You know, you didn't have the Facebooks and the Twitters, and, you know, rock bands were mysterious, and you didn't really know much about them. And when they released something, it was special because there wasn't so much of it.
Right. And up until MTV... Now
there's just too much of it.
You didn't know anything about a band until MTV hit with music videos sometimes, you know?
Exactly. Exactly, and it was just so, like I said, I keep using the word, you know, it was such a mystery. It was that time where you're like, oh my God, you'd race home from school and turn on MTV, I got to see this video, you know, or oh my God, they're releasing an album, I can't wait to get it, because they only released albums every 2, 3, or 4 years, and there weren't 1,000 bands, there were 100. Mm-hmm. You know, now there's just so many bands that try to do the same thing, and you know, there are some albums that stand out. And sadly, I got to say, there are many that don't. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of albums that are just thrown out there that are just rubbish. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm giving my strong opinion again. I'm sure I'll piss people off by saying that, but there's a lot of stuff that, you know, I'm a fan of the band, and like the Van Halen album. I mean, I'm probably one of their biggest fans, and when that album came out, I was really excited about it, and I listened to everything, and I'm like, oh man, this isn't as good as I thought. You know, come on, guys, you know.
Yeah, it can be frustrating when a band's album doesn't live up to expectations. Even now, you have to wait another 2 to 3 years before another one by that band is released, sometimes longer.
I know, man. Absolutely. And I think that's a mistake a lot of bands make. I mean, you got to give people what they want, and what they want is the heyday.
Yeah.
They want, like, Boston, for example. Can you imagine? I mean, Boston just released an album on Frontiers, and, you know, good album, but not the Boston I grew up on.
Right.
It sounds nothing like Boston 1 and 2. Can you imagine if they released an album that sounds every bit as good as the first Boston album, or even close? People would freak out.
Well, it's kind of like when you guys released No More Hell to Pay. It was so good, and it was very reminiscent of, you know, the To Hell with the Devil days and back then. And that's why.
Well, you know why? Because
popular.
I'll tell you why. Because we really tried hard to do that. We purposely went in with a mission, and we set out to go back to our roots. And we, you know, is it as good as the past? I don't know. I mean, it's great to hear people say it is. Is it really? I really don't know. But we tried. We really tried to go back and get back to those harmonies and the guitar solos and the grooves and the style of writing, and give people as close to what it used to be without being repetitive as we could. And I feel that's the mistake a lot of bands make nowadays, is they tend to run the opposite direction of what they used to be.
Right. I completely agree. I mean, you have a couple bands that really try to go back to where they came from and what put them where they are. But I think if more bands did that, I think we'd see a huge resurgence in rock and roll.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Like, imagine if Van Halen released an album like the first Van Halen album.
Oh, man.
With that fire and that style of writing, people would be like, whoa, wow. You know who, there's only a few bands that have done it, but, you know, I think Rat put out a killer album. You know, and Queen's Reich with Todd La Torre put out a killer album. You know what I mean? That's what I'm talking about. Go in the studio with that mentality of, hey guys, we got to give people what made us stars to begin with.
Exactly. And I know that you guys are talking about doing a Sweet Lynch tour at some point, maybe later this year. Have you guys sat down to think about what a Sweet Lynch tour may look like? Maybe playing the album from beginning to end, maybe throwing in some Lynch Mob or Dokken tracks, maybe some Michael Sweet solo stuff or Stryper stuff, what that may look like?
Yeah, we're definitely talking about doing some select dates. It could be anywhere from 12 to 16 to 18 dates, select cities. And obviously would love to do it with Brian and James. If we can't, we're still going to do it, because we're all really busy, you know, and James is out with Fogarty, and it's very hard to align the schedules, but we're going to do our best to do that. And it'll definitely be most of the songs, if not all of the songs from the album, and then certainly 2 or 3 Dokken songs and 2 or 3 Stryper songs. I don't know about solo songs. We'll have to see about that, but I mean, we'll have a set list full of stuff just between Stryper, Dokken, and the new Sweet Lynch album, you know.
Awesome. Have you sat down to maybe think, I know you released I'm Not Your Suicide last year, have you sat down to maybe think about if you can work maybe some solo dates into a schedule sometime?
Oh, I am. That's actually more of a priority than the Sweet Lynch thing.
Okay.
So, I mean, the Sweet Lynch thing's going to happen, but, I mean, absolutely, and then some, the solo thing's going to happen.
Awesome.
I'm planning on putting together a band, going out and doing some solo dates with the band, and doing some solo acoustic dates as well. So, absolutely, I'm going to be doing lots of solo stuff this year, and that's really the focus. That's part of the reason why Stryper isn't happening this year. We decided, let's take the year off and kind of give everyone a breather and not oversaturate, which we feel we've done. The album, new Stryper album, will come out in the fall of this year.
Okay.
So October, November. And we'll hit the ground running doing dates, like, not long after that.
Nice. Awesome. Maybe.
So I just figured, like, well, you know what? I'll have this year to focus on some of my stuff. I'm going to produce a few albums. And I'm going to just focus on what I'm doing, go do some book signings and things like that, and produce some different bands, and probably do another solo album.
Awesome.
There's a lot going on this year. It's still going to be a crazy year, man. I'm hoping I can have a year where I could just do nothing but, you know, eat burgers, and lay on the beach.
I think we all have I think we all wish we could have that here. Awesome. Well, Michael, we covered a lot of stuff in this 20 minutes, man. I want to thank you so much for taking time to talk to me again, and it's been great. The new album's from Sweet Lynch, Only to Rise, out January 23rd here in the States. If you don't get this record, you're robbing yourself of one of the best listening experiences of the year. Go ahead and check out the album, pick it up when it comes out, and we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Thank you, brother. You have a great one, man.
You too, man. Thank you so much.
Take care, buddy. Bye-bye.
See ya.